Hello and welcome to the Warcraft Academy guide to the Kor'kron dark-shaman. This fight involves a lot of avoidable ground effects and a lot of kiting. If you only want a summary of the fight, use the menu at the top to skip to the end, otherwise keep watching. At the start of the fight, the two shamans are in a room in the centre of Orgrimmar and must be pulled outside. They start with two wolf adds with around 10% of their health, and the wolves cleave and put a stacking dot on the tank. They should die fairly quickly as long as you focus them down, and they aren't a major part of the encounter. The two bosses share health and they gain abilities as their health gets lower. Earthbinder Harem starts out with a stacking tank attack that does high frost damage and causes the tank to take increasing frost damage, so he needs to be tank swapped in order to reset the stacks of this. Once he gets to 85% health, he'll start using Toxic Mist, which puts a nature dot on 2 players or 5 players on 25 man. This does damage every second for 30 seconds, and the damage it does gets higher every time it ticks, so by the end of it the damage it does is extremely high. The dot accounts for a huge portion of the raid damage in the fight and is very deadly, so you need to take extra care not to get hit by other abilities whilst you have it. At 65% health he'll start using Foul Stream, which puts a marker on one random player. After 3 seconds, a green line will shoot out towards the player and do nature damage to everyone that it hits, including the targeted player. The targeted player cannot avoid this, so he should try to move somewhere to avoid hitting other people, and use a cooldown if necessary. At 45% health he'll use Ashen Wall, which creates a wall of elementals at the position of the tank, extending out in either direction. The wall prevents you from moving through it, and if you get too close to it the elementals will melee you for fairly high damage, so you just need to avoid it. The other boss, Wavebinder Cardris, starts out with a high damage Froststorm Bolt that does high frost damage to the tank, although it's not much of a problem on its own, but after performing a tank swap the debuff from Froststorm's strike may make it hurt more. At 85% he'll gain Toxic Storm, which creates a storm that moves around the room and does damage to players that stand in it. The Toxic Storm will also create tornadoes that move around faster, and they'll deal damage and knock you in the air if they hit you. At 65% he'll start using Foul Geyser, which shoots a geyser that follows the tank for a few seconds. The geyser does extremely high nature damage and spawns a foul slime twice per second at the location of the geyser. The foul slimes are adds that move slowly towards players and deal pulsing AoE damage to anyone within 3 yards. When Foul Geyser is cast, the tank needs to run around to avoid the geyser and ideally try to spawn the adds clumped together. After they've spawned, your range can then AoE them to kill them. At 45% he'll gain the ability Falling Ash, which creates a very large circle on the ground. After 30 seconds, a meteor will hit that does massive damage to anyone in the circle, and 200,000 damage to the entire raid. Avoid the circle and, if needed, use a raid cooldown just before the meteor impacts to reduce the raid damage. The main issue with this fight is dealing with all the abilities overlapping, which can cause you to run out of space to stand very quickly, since the floor will eventually be covered with tornadoes, storms, slime adds, elemental walls and falling ash and everything else. The central area of Orgrimmar is perfect for kiting the bosses around in a circle to avoid their abilities, but you do need to make sure to use the space intelligently. Don't hesitate to keep moving to avoid their abilities, but always stay as a group. Start by pulling the bosses and focusing on burning down the dogs quickly. Ideally you want to kill the dogs before the bosses reach 85% health, so you don't need to worry about Toxic Storm or Mist until the dogs are dead. Your tanks will need to taunt off each other to keep stacks of Froststorms strike low. Whenever a Toxic Storm is created, move the raid away from it so that it doesn't cause you many problems. You may need to keep moving as the storm moves around. It's up to you to decide how much space you have left and whether you should move, but be careful to make sure you have enough space to spawn the adds and have them AoE'd before they reach the raid. Prioritise healing the tanks and whichever players have Toxic Mist, and don't be afraid to use cooldowns to reduce the overall raid damage. Once the boss reaches 25% health, they'll use Bloodlust and start dealing more damage and attacking faster. This is when you should use your own Bloodlust to counter it and burn them down as quickly as possible. This fight is generally very punishing for melee, so ranged are a much better choice. As long as you make use of the space, keep kiting and avoid the storms, you shouldn't have too many issues with this fight. To summarise, kill the walls first, avoid the storms and tornadoes, and kite the bosses around in a circle. Move away from the person with Foul Stream and have your tank run around when targeted with Foul Geyser. AoE the adds from range, move out of the big circles and avoid the elemental walls. Tank swap to keep stacks of Froststorm strike low and use Bloodlust at 25%. My name's Ivrelia, thank you very much for watching, and please visit warcraftacademy.com for all the latest guides for Siege of Orgrimmar.